Are you struggling with the AP Lang essays, whether it's rhetorical analysis, argument, or synthesis? Don't sweat it. In this video, I'll break down exactly what you need to do to write each essay and how to level up your writing with strategies that actually work. Hi guys, I'm Sarah. I'm a former high school English teacher with over a decade of classroom experience here to make English uncomplicated. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos, and timestamps are below in the description for your convenience. Okay, so we're going to do a quick breakdown of the test format before we get into some more specific tips. Remember, part of being prepared for the exam is knowing how the test is formatted. There are two sections of the exam, the multiple choice section and the essay section. After the multiple choice section, you'll have a short break, and then you'll return to the test for the second and final section of the test, the free response or essay section. In this section, you will have 2 hours and 15 minutes to answer 3 free response questions. This section counts for 55% of your exam score. There will be 1 synthesis question, 1 rhetorical analysis question, and 1 argument question. Okay, now let's get into some specific tips and reminders for each of the 3 essays that you'll be writing. Like I said earlier, you'll have 2 hours and 15 minutes to write these 3 essays. The 15 minutes is designated for reading the synthesis sources, and then you'll have 40 minutes to complete each essay. Try to stick to these timeframes to the best of your ability, otherwise you'll find yourself running out of time at the end of the test. Here are some tips for each of the essays. First up, synthesis. For the synthesis question, you will have to read 6 texts and then create an argument that uses 3 of those sources as evidence to support your thesis. Now, some of these reminders might sound extremely obvious, but in the past I did have students who failed to do some of these things, so I wanted to make sure to drive home the point. So here are some tips for you as you write your synthesis essay. First, keep in mind that this is an argument essay, so you need to let your argument drive the essay. Use the sources to support an original idea that you have. These are the strongest essays. Next, let's talk about evidence. Please make sure you use at least 3 sources. If you don't do this, you cannot score higher than 1 point on row B. This is so easy to do. Please do not miss this. Next, make sure to quote and cite your sources that you're using. Those 3 sources that you're using. You want to make it clear to the reader that you are using a source from the source packet. Finally, try to layer your sources. What do I mean by this? You need to try to use evidence from more than 1 source in the same paragraph. This sets you up really nicely for synthesizing the evidence and putting your sources in conversation with one another in your commentary. Because this is an argument essay at its core, you might feel obligated to include a counterargument. If you want to include a counterargument, you can, but you don't have to. If you do decide to include one, remember that you can use evidence from a source to support an opposing viewpoint, and then use another source to refute it. You can also nest a counterargument within one of your existing body paragraphs. It doesn't have to be its own paragraph. Now, if you get a prompt asking you what the most important factors are regarding a topic, you can list which factors need considering in your thesis. Then your body paragraphs will argue why those factors are important. Finally, keep your conclusion brief. Rephrase your thesis and then state a sentence or 2 to conclude. Okay, moving on to essay number 2, the rhetorical analysis prompt. Obviously, the first step is to read and annotate the prompt. The prompt asks you to analyze the rhetorical choices an author makes. So while you can simply point out the rhetorical devices that you saw an author make, this is not a very sophisticated approach. Here's what I recommend. College Board likes to select prompts that have sections within them, but they're not labeled. So how do you determine what these sections are? Well, each section is based around a strategy that the author is using. There are typically natural shifts within the prompt. For example, if an author spends the first 2 paragraphs appealing to her credibility and expertise, that's her first strategy. And then in the 3rd paragraph begins to explain the significance of the topic at hand, then that is a natural shift. You can clearly see a shift in strategy. So the opening paragraphs would be the first section of your prompt. Then you would continue to annotate and pay close attention to when you see another natural shift. Typically, there are 2 to 3 sections in a College Board prompt. You can then use each section as a body paragraph. Use your first section as the first body paragraph, second section as the second body paragraph, etc. If you cannot write 3 body paragraphs, which is okay, then I suggest that you combine 2 of the sections and write 2 body paragraphs. I also recommend doing a short and sweet intro paragraph of 2 sentences. The first sentence should be for context and introduce the rhetorical situation, and then the last sentence should be your thesis. For your thesis, make sure that you identify the following elements: the speaker, rhetorical choices, and the purpose. For example, if we are looking at the 2020 Kennedy prompt, your thesis might look like this. Reagan first discusses Kennedy's qualities as a man, highlights his accomplishments as a leader, and recalls his legacy in order to raise money for the Kennedy Presidential Library. The speaker I've identified as Reagan. I've listed the 3 strategies that I'll be focusing on, and the purpose that I've stated is to raise money for the Presidential Library. Okay, moving on to body paragraphs. Remember that you are aligning each of them with a section or strategy from the prompt, so make sure you work through the prompt in chronological order. Next, be sure to have topic sentences for each of your body paragraphs. In order to create transitions and a line of reasoning, include a transition or a link to the previous paragraph in your second and third body paragraph. And finally, you should try to have 2 to 3 supporting choices or devices per paragraph. Most likely, you will not have time to write 3 body paragraphs with 3 pieces of evidence in each paragraph. But maybe you have 3 body paragraphs that each have 2 pieces of evidence, or you have 2 body paragraphs with 3 pieces of evidence each. It's very flexible. Use your discretion. There is no exact formula. Next, always provide context for your quotations. Instead of saying, in the last paragraph, quote, 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 try to contextualize your quotation by describing what happened in the text. For example, you might say, after admonishing the senators for their poor choices, and then insert your quotation. Finally, let's chat commentary. Your commentary should always answer these 2 questions. Number 1, what does the choice or device do? And number 2, how does that affect your specific audience in this passage? If you discuss both of these things for each piece of evidence, then you'll be golden. Just like in your synthesis essay, keep your conclusion short and sweet. Re-emphasize why the author makes these rhetorical choices, and move on. Last but not least, we have the argument prompt. Remember, for this prompt, you need to come up with a position on the topic that they present to you and create a well-reasoned argument that is supported with specific evidence that you have come up with by yourself. Let's get into the details. For your intro, keep it short and sweet, just like all the other essays, and your introduction with your thesis statement. Your thesis statement needs to take a position on the topic. Let's look at an example using the 2024 prompt about possessions. You want to avoid simply stating an obvious fact or summarizing the prompt. A thesis along the lines of, many people in the 21st century value possessions would not earn you the thesis point because it doesn't take a defensible position. That is simply a general observation. The thesis must take a position. For example, you could say, Americans have a harmful habit of placing an inordinate amount of value on possessions, which can lead to negative effects in their lives. This takes the position that Americans care too much about possessions, and the essay will go on to provide more detailed reasons about the negative implications of overvaluing one's possessions. For the body of your paper, each paragraph should start with a topic sentence that is a claim or reason to support your thesis. And how do you support your claims? With evidence. All right, this part is super important. For your evidence, you need to use proper nouns. What I mean by this is naming a specific person, place, thing, etc. For example, instead of just saying protests in your evidence, it would be much more effective to name specific protests, for example, Occupy Wall Street or the 2017 Women's March, etc. Now, once you've introduced your evidence, you need to comment on it. Commentary should always connect your evidence back to your claim or reason you're trying to support. Please make sure to explain how it supports your reason. Don't just make your reader assume. Now, do you need a counter-argument or rebuttal? In my opinion, no. Only include a counter-argument if you can actually think of one that will enhance your argument. Don't just have a counter-argument for the sake of having one. Think about real positions that people take against yours. If you do decide to include a counter-argument, remember that it doesn't have to be its own paragraph. It can be nested within one of your other body paragraphs. Finally, for your conclusion, rephrase your thesis and then state a sentence or 2 to wrap it all up. I'd like to make a brief note on thesis statements for your argument and synthesis prompts. If you want to create a more sophisticated argument, consider including a concession in your thesis statement. For example, you could say, while possessions can bring people joy, Americans have a harmful habit of placing an inordinate amount of value on possessions, which can lead to negative effects in their lives. This acknowledges that you recognize some validity in an opposing viewpoint. A concession demonstrates a more nuanced understanding of the topic, and it can lead you to a more sophisticated argument as a whole. All right, that's it for today. Please be sure to like this video if you thought it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.